3, 2.
All right, next up we have Phil from the NRCS and AJ's last appearance in public as an NRCS forester. AJ is going to be the new Bennington County forester over on the other side. Windsor County forester on the other side of the greens. So, but NRCS is a great organization, and Phil and AJ are going to talk to us about it. Thank you.
Lost her.
Uh-oh.
Well, I'm Phil. I'm the soil conservationist for Bennington County. I know some of you have worked with NRCS before, or are currently working with NRCS. So this will be a little bit of a review for some of you, but we'll get started. So the NRCS provides technical and financial assistance to basically agricultural producers, and forestry falls into that, no matter how big your woods are. As long as you're managing it for wildlife or forestry or any other forest benefit. So funding is available to address resource concerns on the land. There needs to be a resource concern, which could be inadequate food or cover for wildlife, excessive plant pressure, so invasive species, or the forest not being as productive you want it to. Things like that. The majority of the practices are funded through the EQIP program, which is the Environmental Qualities Incentive Program. There's also CSP, which is getting revamped for next year, so I won't even go into that because it's going to be completely different. And then we partner with Fish and Wildlife and Forest Parks and Recreation to get some of these practices on the ground and implemented. So this is a list of the forestry and wildlife practices that are available. I would like to say the crux of all this is that a forest management plan needs to be on file with the county forester and approved, and these practices would need to be in it as well. Obviously they would need to be amended if it wasn't in the plan.
See
if we can get that back.
Computer as well.
Said to me when I did a presentation before here too. Well, we got early successional habitat development and management. Maybe we can put it on here. Forest stand improvement, which includes all those practices. So there's forest bird habitat management, pre-commercial thinning, crop tree release, mass tree release, all under that umbrella. And then you have apple tree release, forest trail and landings improvements. Am I in your way here? I'm sorry. And then invasive plant control. So I'll let you talk about that really session.
Yep. So we're just going to talk about each of the practices one by one. As you can see, this is a nice patch cut here. But so one of the major practices that we offer is early successional habitat, and we do that mostly through creating young forest on the landscape. But we also do it through brush hogging, managing for grassland birds, and habitat like that. So this particular these pictures are for young forest habitat. So we're using a lot of this young forest habitat throughout the state due to land use. So there's other things I should say on that slide. There are a lot of threatened birds that require the habitat. So that's why the NRCS is interested in implementing these on the landscape. They're also a food source for a lot of different mammals, large mammals and small, deer, bear, rabbits, stuff like that would be using this type of habitat. So it's a really important habitat that we need throughout the state, and so it's a practice that we offer. So this is what what a patch cut looks like. So what we try to do is we leave coarse woody debris and snags throughout the patch to get the coarse woody debris for grouse, for drumming sites mostly. We leave live leaf trees and snags throughout the patch. The snags can be used as raptor perches. They're used for dens. They're important to leave throughout. We like to leave live leaf trees as seed source or mass, and for mass. They also create some vertical structure in the patch cut. Yeah, and also benefit to leaving the whole trees on the ground. It protects the regeneration that comes up from deer and for to browse. Something we like to do. It's a requirement of ours through these practices to leave a whole tree just left on the ground, cut and separate, and that gets the fine woody debris and it also gets the coarse woody debris. So these are areas that the pictures aren't going to do well if we can't see them.
They do regenerate after a minute, so
Yeah.
we'll just change the page a minute before we need it.
All right. So the next few slides will be areas that we like to patch cut in particular, because what we like to do for all these practices, they get to be pre-commercial practices. So for the patch cuts, they got to be areas that it wouldn't pay to have a logger come and cut that. So areas like pasture pine that are weevilled and overgrown and are the only value is for chips. There's and nothing else really. Those are areas that we will help cost share to create early successional habitat. Other areas are poor quality northern hardwood sites that there's a lot of UGS, undesirable growing stock, so we like to regenerate them as we go. So this is a picture of pasture pine, half a picture, and then
Also
half a picture of the after. Let's see. You can put it on the computer maybe. Maybe I can get it back.
Oh, it's the whole screen now somehow.
All right, so that's the before. Quick. There's the after. That's like right after. So that's after the certification visit that I made. There's snags and there's live leaf trees left on the ground. This is a declining early successional forest. So there's a lot of aspen and birch in this stand. That's a great opportunity to kind of set it back again and let it grow up into that aspen and birch. The after was so good too. No. No. So, and the reason we do aspen and birch is aspen is a really prolific cedar once it's cut. It sets up a lot of root sprouts. So areas like that are areas that we like to target for that, and they're poor quality and they're non-commercial areas.
Your next one is
The next one. So the next one I talked about a little bit too is the northern, poor quality northern hardwood site. So an area with a lot of UGS that there's not a lot of quality trees that will become future saw logs, or there's no saw logs in there. So it's a good opportunity to kind of reset and get some new growth coming into the site.
So for the next practice, which is the forest stand improvement, a good segue from the early successional habitat into more of a timber management is the forest bird practice. And what this is kind of an area-wide thinning, but it's going to have smaller patch cuts within the thinning that creates a vertical structure for neotropical birds, migrating birds, which gives a bunch of different strata in the canopy that different birds will use specific layers within the canopy. And in current forest situations, in a lot of Vermont's woods, it's kind of all one level, and it's just recreating that structure both horizontally and vertically throughout the forest. So having those openings like down in here, there's some patches which gives that horizontal differentiation in forest canopy. And the next slide talks about kind of what I already said, the birds using different levels of the canopy for different species using specific levels of the canopy. And there are the birds. So this is an example of poor forest bird habitat. There's not a whole lot of vertical or horizontal structure. And the next slide shows that it's totally different after the practice is done. And again, this is going to be in woods where you're not going to have a commercial value from a logger coming in and taking wood out. The other forest stand improvement practice is the pre-commercial thinning, which is pretty much your basic thinning. You're just you're taking down an area down to a specific basal area or stocking rate for the trees, and again, it's in an area that it would be smaller diameter, higher stocking rates, something that wouldn't be commercial again, and it reduces the composition for the residual stand, so you get better production out of the timber that's remaining. The next one is crop tree release. Kind of like the pre-commercial thinning, but what you're doing is taking specific trees that you think are going to do well and produce well. They're either the specific species you want, specific form, and you're releasing those trees on 3 to 4 sides so that they will do produce better in less competition. And that's an example here. This is an unthinned forest canopy. So this is saying that the trees are marked. So this is when you take out the trees, and these crop trees are the ones remaining. And the residual forest is going to have less competition. And similar to crop tree release is mass release, which is more of a wildlife focus, which is looking at trees that produce hard and soft mass for wildlife. You're basically doing the same thing and taking the trees that you want to release, releasing them on 3 to 4 sides, and giving those less competition so that they can produce more mass. Mass producing trees that are in more competition are not going to produce as much mass as if they were released. Beech trees, if you open up the south side, they'll get sun scald. It's just something to be aware of if you want beech or don't want beech. It's just something to be aware of, that the beech will be affected by opening the canopy pretty readily because of their thin bark. And these are common mass trees. There are some other mass trees that we would also release, but those are kind of secondary, but these are the main ones that you'd want to look for in your woods.
Why are they called mast trees? We're not using them for rigging anymore, are we?
Mast is the fruit of the tree, so it's either going to be a hard mast like an acorn, or a hickory nut, or a soft mast, which is like cherry,
Apple.
Yeah, apple.
What's the difference between a mass tree release and a crop tree release? Is that just based on, I mean, the mass trees, you're obviously looking for bigger trees to stay, perhaps.
Mass tree,
But
you're looking
is
for.
it kind of a fine.
It's the difference mainly is, are you looking for better quality timber in your cut? So is your goal of your cut to get better quality timber, or is the goal of your cut to produce more mass?
Okay.
So it's very similar, but the main function is it going to be for wildlife benefit, or is it going to be for timber production?
So perhaps with mast, you're less concerned about form of the tree.
Correct.
Okay.
And crop tree release is more of an area, or stand-wide thinning or something like that, where mass trees we're kind of picking groups here and there within a stand. So if we got a group of 5 oaks here, we'll release those, and we get another group over here, we'll release those. Where crop tree, we're trying to do 30 or 40 trees throughout an acre.
So this is a pre-cut mass tree release, and if we can get it, that is kind of just the open canopy of an after mass tree release. Do you want me to take this one? It's basically the same thing as mass tree release. It's just apple tree release. What you're doing is, because apples like full sun, you're just getting the competition out from all around the apple trees, and it's basically the same thing. It's a soft mass tree, but it's in a different practice code, so that's kind of why we separated it out. And then this is kind of what you're looking for when you're releasing trees, is dominant and co-dominant trees within the forest stand, unless it's apple trees. And then you're going to release on 3 or 4 sides. I hope you got that. snags and cavity trees.
Okay, yeah, so for all these are all tree cutting practices through the NRCS, and they each have their own standards, but a standard throughout all of them is to leave snags and cavity trees and coarse woody trees throughout. So you need 4 snags per acre and 4 coarse woody trees per acre. Snags, they're, without NRCS, they're easy to manage anyways on your land, so it's just something, if you have some kind of ugly trees that you want to get rid of, you can go out and girdle them. It's an easy thing to do. You're not felling them into trees you want to leave, so you can just cut them and let them fall in place, and then they create great wildlife benefits throughout. So you want to target those trees that are non-commercial, trees that aren't going to be saw logs. Like pasture pine's a great one. Like these are all great trees to girdle. Like these, you can't see this really, but that's a huge pasture pine that's taking up a ton of room in the canopy, and it's taking a bunch of growing space. If you were to cut that, so that's surrounded, that one is surrounded by a bunch of nice young hardwoods. So if we were to cut that and fell that would smash a lot of those hardwoods that we'd want to keep. So girdling that, it's going to fall into place. It's going to lose its branches over time, over maybe up to 20 years, and potentially, depending on a bunch of different things. So they provide a lot of denning opportunities, and actually and they'll create cavities too, and the cavities are important for the northern long-eared bat, which was recently listed as threatened. They'll use those cavities as well. So snags and cavities may look ugly on a tree, but they're in your woodlot, but they're great habitat for wildlife.
Invasive plants is what's next.
Right. The next practice that we offer is invasive plant control. This one's a huge one down here in Bennington County and in southern Vermont in particular. This picture I took is in Windsor, and the whole forest, it was like 100 acres, it looked like that, so it's barberry, really thick throughout it. Invasive plants, they suppress the native plants that should be there, the young trees that should be coming up in those gaps in the canopy. They're prolific seeders. The seeds are pretty low in nutrients for wildlife and birds. We'd rather have our birds eating our native berries from our native plants that should be in those understories. Those seeds, the prolific seeders, like I said, and the seeds remain in the soil for a long time. So if we were to cut these, so say we treated this understory and then we did a harvest in there, there's still a ton of seeds in the ground. And as soon as there's sunlight and more, the soil temperature goes up, they're going to start to resprout. So it can be a real pain to control invasives on a property.
Limit what can be done silviculturally.
Yeah, so I talked about this a little bit. So they're a problem for many reasons. One of which is they limit what we can do silviculturally on a site. So if we want to do some type of regeneration cut and we want to regenerate native plants, but we have a site that is just covered with barberry like that picture before, it's going to be really hard to get those native trees that we're trying to get in the regeneration cut. They're expensive to treat. They don't generate any income to treat them. It usually involves some kind of herbicides to control them, especially if you want to do it economically and quickly and efficiently, really. The NRCS provides payment for an herbicide treatment on sites that are really thick, so like the pictures before, so sites that are really dense, we provide a one-time payment of an herbicide treatment. And the reason we do herbicide treatment and not a mechanical is because it's the most cost-effective way to treat it, and to know we're actually going to get a good kill on it. We do some light mechanical pulling, so if we're in a site where it's just starting to come in, there's young plants, it's easy to pull, we do cost share some of that. But in sites where those pictures, where it's really thick like that, those are areas where we're going to want to use some herbicide. Some things that we can do to prevent the spread of invasives. I think it's important for landowners to know what they have on their property, so develop some kind of invasive plant management plan that involves like a map and a plan stating what's on the site, and some options of treating it. And I think the map is the most important thing, because the map will show some densities. It'll talk about cover and what kind of trees are there, and that's something you can hand to an herbicide applicator, invasive plant control applicator, and they could look at that and give you a quote just by looking at that a lot of the time. So knowing what you have on the property is really important. If you're planning a harvest, have it in the contract that the equipment will be washed before it's on site, so you're not getting seeds from another site on your property where they were just cutting.
That's no longer optional. I mean, don't you have to do that?
No, it's
Still
not
optional.
It's still optional. I mean, it's something you could have in a contract as a landowner, saying you will wash your equipment before you come onto the site.
So it's not a state law that you have to wash.
No. Yeah, and another thing you can do, look at your neighbors, see what they have for invasive plants, try to develop some kind of community-wide invasive control project and try to get your neighbors involved. So, we've done it in the past where one person did an invasive control project with us, and they got their neighbors involved, and so we treated a pretty large site just because, the neighbors, they talked to each other, and we controlled a pretty big block. And it's also important to know what's coming our way, especially down here. We get a lot of stuff that's coming up from Massachusetts. Bittersweet's one that kind of recently is spreading north up 91 over on the eastern part of the state and up Route 7. So knowing what's coming and knowing what it looks like, so we can treat it before it becomes a problem on your property.
We just became aware of poison parsnip.
Right.
We have a very nice example of it right in front of our sign, just to help people understand.
Right.
But I went up to Peru and land growth, and all the side roads are already filled with it.
Yeah. It hasn't taken long for it to take a hold and just come up. When I first started, I saw it more down this way, and slowly it's worked its way up 7, or not slowly, it's come up 7 and same up on the other side,
Well, we just won't be able to walk through the pastures like our parents used to. We'll have to be very careful what we're walking in.
Yep. Yeah, and on top of that, you have ticks to worry about in those pastures too. Something else I was going to mention, but I forgot it now. Anyway, so this next slide will show an example of an invasive management plan, and these are maps that I've developed through the EQIP program. One of the maps on here is the town forest. This is the town forest. I developed the plan for, so they get a plan of attack to treat that area, and another one's for an EQIP participant that we developed that plan for, and we got that sprayed over last fall. I'm available. Hopefully the next forester, he will be available too, to come on landowners' properties and do a walkthrough and plan out, the EQIP projects, but also do some mapping of the invasives. And I think, and even your consulting forester would be able to do that. And I think it doesn't take a long time to do that. It took me maybe half a day to get that one that keeps flashing. It's in the lower corner. It's a smaller property, but I mean, once you have that map, it makes it a lot easier to make a plan of where do I start treating first. The next slide is a list of common invasive plants that are in our area. We all know about the honeysuckle and the buckthorn, barberry. I think those are the most common ones that we have, and they've been here the longest as well. Some of the newer ones we're getting is the poison parsnip, the wild chervil, black swallowwort. There's a pretty big infestation in Woodstock, but it's not over here. So that's like one that we should pay attention to in Bennington County. It's a problem over in Woodstock and Heartland area, but it's not necessarily a problem over here yet.
There's some in Brattleboro, and I have it on my property.
Yeah.
So it just
Right, and that one's, and it's seed. It's a prolific seeder. It's got little pods, and it shoots out a ton of seeds.
And that one, I've heard that the monarch butterfly will lay its eggs because it is a milkweed, but it's more toxic, so they don't develop their life cycle. So it's actually
Really, I didn't know
a
that.
problem for the monarchs.
Huh.
Yeah, I forget who was telling me about that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. It's
It's kind of
Another
stuff.
reason to try to get rid of it.
It
Do
looks like
we
we're
have
gonna-
anything akin to like 4A clubs that might be inclined to do weeding of invasive species on their collective properties? I mean, it sounds like it's something that kids who have abundant energy
Right.
should be
Yeah.
doing.
I know the Conservation Corps does some.
Right.
They do some. I actually think
They can't do private property.
they can't do private property, right? But I know they were doing some stuff along the Battenkill, I believe.
BYCC.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've tried it.
That town forest example, we had a polling day there. We didn't get as many people as we'd like, and we spent all day, and it was in glossy buckthorn that was super thick. It was all about this tall. We had 20 acres. We weren't planning on getting 20 acres. We were like, maybe we'll get 5. We spent all day and got an acre. So it takes a long time to pull it, and we had probably 15 people throughout the day pulling. And we were pulling, hanging, and piling, and
So an aggressive burn, does that help?
it could that could be an option. I know Gary Hawks, he's kind of experimenting with that. He's got like a blowtorch thing, and he'll blowtorch the stem, and he's got good success with that. With barberry, was kind of experimentally doing it. And
Goats.
goats is another alternative to herbicides that I've heard about. I know Chris Paulton will use them. He's out of Massachusetts. He's a herbicide applicator that will spray on our jobs too for equip. But I mean it's too bad it's come to this, but herbicide's probably your best bet to the most effective way to do it. And the contractors that we work with and the contractors at the state are really good, and they're responsible for what they're spraying. They know what they're spraying. They're super targeted, even though you're going to get some drift, but they're super targeted with the systems that they're using. So they're going to kill what's there, and you're not going to get a lot of killing your natives. And there's different methods of chemical spraying. The most common way is probably foliar, so you're spraying the leaves. The second one is you can cut stump and treat the stump, and then there's basal bark. But those are probably the most common methods to chemical control. And we, if you signed up with NRCS, we require that you use a licensed herbicide applicator. Like I said, they're really good, and there's a group of them that we use down here that just because they're local, that are awesome.
The one caveat that I'd like to mention for equip, anyway, is that the standard requires a 90% kill. A lot of the contractors will say in their contract that they will get that 90% kill, but before we even get to that, if on the property there's not a chance that we could get that 90% kill, we can't really cost share on it, which is unfortunate, and I'd like to be able to do more, but as the program sits right now, we need to get that 90% kill to be able to cost share on something like that.
Mm-hmm.
How much money do you actually have available statewide?
Statewide, it varies, but there is a payment threshold, and it depends on what kind of infestation we're looking at. So if it's a moderate infestation, it's one payment rate versus a difficult control, and I believe it's 12,000.
Yep, this is the threshold.
Yeah, so 12,000 per contract, and I believe for moderate that's like
20 or 25 acres, something like that, before you hit that cap, and then heavy it's around 16. And that's a lot of the reason, like Phil was saying, there's some properties we just can't help because we have only $12,000 that we can put towards the project, and if it's all heavy and it's acres and acres of heavy, we can only treat a small chunk of that. So
that's where something like the farm bill comes in, right? Because it's just not funded.
yeah, well, this is through the
farm-
farm bill.
through the
Yeah.
farm bill.
Yeah.
I mean, when you hear about it and you just think whatever, then it comes down to.
Oh, right, yeah.
It
So this
really
is
is
right,
just-
the farm bill, right? So
Yeah.
that they dictated through. So we used to have 2 treatments we used to do, but we no longer did that, and that was from the farm bill. We now only have 1 treatment. So we could have started maybe help with those more aggressive areas with the second treatment. We don't have that anymore.
If you help a landowner develop a multi-stage plan, like the example you gave before, can you do that 12,000 threshold over a series of years in a series of places on a piece
Yeah.
of property?
Yep.
Yeah, you can have multiple contracts. So that threshold's for per contract. So you could have
Per
multiple.
contract?
Yeah, so you could have multiple contracts, which I've done in the past, where we did 2 different contracts to treat a property because one just didn't quite do it. But we had a good chance of getting it some level of control on the property.
But you require both contracts to be signed at the same time for the landowner to go through?
No, they don't have to be signed at the same time.
Okay.
No.
So you'll cost share half a project with the caveat of them maybe not being able to do the other half?
Well, the contracts are based on ranking, and so if the application gets the ranking points on its own as it stands, then that application is good, and then the next application the same thing. As far as invasive species only projects go right now, they don't rank as high as they could. My understanding is that our state office is looking at that and trying to get those invasive only projects a little more points so that they could potentially rank out, if they're good projects, that'll help promote forestry in the state.
And they'll help with that invasive only too. If you have a contract already signed, it'll get you more points on that second one, hopefully. You know, so.
I think it's still you.
Okay, the next slide, if it pops up, flashes at us, we also are, another practice we offer through EQIP is improving forest trails. So if there's trails that you have on your property that are eroding due to past use, harvesting or ATV use, and they were never put away properly, so you have the proper water bars throughout and you have active erosion on the property, the NRCS will help cost share that and fix those rows up to stop the erosion. So because we want to protect the water quality and the soil quality on the site. So the big caveat with this, it's got to be actively eroding. So if you've got a woodlot that's got no water bars but it's not eroding, it's not something we can help with. We can help you through technical assistance to put water bars in place, but we wouldn't be able to cost share that. So it's designed for infrequent use. So we want so you're in there maybe every once in a while pulling out firewood or something like that. We don't want people. We don't want to fix it up and then then the landowner just keeps running their ATV up and down it. That's not something we want to help with. So the basic bit of the project is practice is to do water bars and grade and shape the road so the water is getting off the road and not washing down. If it flashes again, we've got a before and after project on RCPP program property. Sorry, that's a new program that's in the Lake Champlain Basin to help clean up Lake Champlain. So there's a separate pot of money from EQIP that people in the Lake Champlain Basin can fix up their roads. So this is before. There's a big old gully down the center, and there's the car there. So the car's parked right there, and then we put water bars all the way down. That's good. Really quick, got that in there. So that's like a 30% grade. So there's quite a few water bars in there. We closed it out as well, so we put bigger water bars because the landowner's not going to use it anymore. They're going to find another way out. And we seeded and mulched the whole stretch because it was really steep. So to finish up with the RCPP thing is, like I said, it's a different pot of money and it's available to people in the basin, and it's to do this type of work on eroding roads. There's also stream crossing project available in that RCPP funding for Lake Champlain. We also offer it for EQIP, but we don't fund as many of those for whatever reason through EQIP. But yeah, just so you're aware.
Is that just for the Lake Champlain watershed? Because we're not Lake Champlain
RCPP is. The EQIP has this forest trails as well, so that's available to everyone else out of the basin. So.
RCPP has the same practices as EQIP. It's just that they are a separate pot of money for the Lake Champlain Basin.
Mm-hmm.
The other caveat that I wanted to say for the forest trails and landings practice is that there is a little bit of leeway, but the main idea is that it's going to be something past housing structures or something like that. So this is something that's going into the woods and it's being used for logging, and that's the basis of the road work. So this is tax dollars going to fix environmental resource concerns, and there have been things in the past where we ended up paying on these things and it turned out to be someone's camp road. So that's kind of what the basis of this project is for logging roads that are actively eroding and need to be seeded down, basically.
Are those logging roads also snowmobile roads in our network? Or is that
For
a
like
different-
bass trails.
Yeah.
We won't fix up vast trails. Vast, I always recommend to the landowner if they're eroding on a vast trail to talk to Vast because they should be able to help with that. But we fix up, so we won't fix up town roads like class 4 town roads either,
Mhm.
because the town should fix it or whatever. I don't know. That's just a standard. We don't do town roads. We don't do vast trails, but. We'll do just the trails that are, like Phil said, just going in the woods that access a woodlot to pull out wood.
So this is how you sign up for any of these practices. You either contact me, that's where I'm located in Rutland, and that's my phone number. My extension is 216. I have cards on the back table. Or now there's a new way you can go online, sign up through the Conservation Client Gateway. I have a pamphlet back there about how that works as well. You do need to get authentication clearance through the USDA, and it's a little bit of a process right now, but it sounds like you can do it all online at this point too. What else would I say on there? Or you can contact whoever is replacing AJ or the Fish and Wildlife technicians, and they'll contact me and get an application. And I also have some applications on the back table should you need one or want one. And I think that's it. Any questions?
What kind of landowners do you tend to work? Is there an acreage amount?
Any acreage.
Who can apply?
Anyone can apply. Any tax-paying citizen who is an agricultural producer who is eligible, basically. Also, you need to make an AGI requirement, which is your adjusted gross income, which you need to make under $900,000 average for the past 3 years, and that's basically the eligibility requirements. But if you didn't meet those requirements, the NRCS will still work with you doing technical assistance. We just can't provide financial assistance.
And forest landowner, he said agricultural, so forest landowners, NRCS
Right,
considers agricultural producers. The trees, trees are your crop.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming and dealing with the technical problems. So this is the first part of the 3-part series. We're hoping to be able to put this on YouTube and be able to reach folks that weren't able to make it. So hopefully we'll be able to broaden this out and reach as many folks as we can so people know what's available to them. There's a lot of resources available, and I think it's important for them to realize what they all are. So like I said, this is the first part. We have another one on Thursday and another one in August. So Thursday we're going to concentrate on timber management. So we're going to have a consulting forester come talk to us. The consulting forester is going to cover management plans, working with a consultant, things like that. Then we have a logging contractor who also is a forester who's going to come and talk about logging contracts, current market conditions, and then we're going to end it with a presentation on the Vermont Tree Farm program. And then in August, we're going to concentrate on kind of the stuff the state has to offer. So the use value appraisal program, vtinvasives.org, and the stewardship program. So hopefully we'll see you guys there. And yeah, thank you very much for coming. Thanks.
Thank you.